Hi everyone, myself Amrutha, Assistant Professor from Department of Computer Science, St. Edward's College, Autonomous. Today we have been going to have a session from operating systems. Mainly we have been focusing on the FCFS scheduling algorithms, that is first come first serve scheduling algorithms. So before going to the topic, let's discuss about what is the importance of scheduling algorithms. Why we have been using different scheduling algorithms. Why we have been using is that there are different processes which are requesting the CPUs. In what manner these requests should be processed, it is based upon these different types of scheduling algorithms can be chosen for to processing that request. So there are different types of scheduling algorithms. First comes first serve, shortest job next, shortest job first, and priority scheduling, round robin scheduling, multi-level queue scheduling, and multi-level feedback queue scheduling. So today we have been focusing on the scheduling algorithms, that is FCFS, that is first come first serve scheduling algorithms. So by the name itself, it is clear that what does this algorithm is. So FCFS means first come first serve. That means the process which are requesting the CPU first, that process will get the CPU first. So in what manner the processes are requesting the CPU, in that particular manner itself, the CPU will be assigned to that process. So first of all, it can be implemented by using the FIFO queue, that is first in first out queue. So it is basically a simplest algorithm in the operating scheduling algorithms, and FCFS scheduling algorithm is non-preemptive algorithms. In case of non-preemptive algorithm means there are preemptive algorithms and non-preemptive algorithms. In the case of preemptive algorithms, whenever an interruption occurs in between, it will take up to that if it is a priority process, it will take upon that request. But in the case of non-priority scheduling algorithms, if in case in between an interruption occurs from a priority process, it will not consider about that process. After the execution of that process only, it will consider that if it is high priority or non-priority, it will be considered only after that execution of that continuing process. So that is about the first come first serve scheduling algorithms. The first come first serve scheduling algorithm is a non-preemptive algorithms, and it is basically a simplest algorithm in the scheduling algorithms. It is served, the CPU is served in the manner the process which are requesting first, that in particular manner itself the CPU will be allocated, and it can be implemented by using the FIFO queue. And what is the one of the main disadvantage of the first in first out scheduling algorithm is that convo effect. What is this convo effect? You all be familiar with this, the term convo effect. That is, whenever the CPU is executing a higher burst time process. The burst time means the execution time of a process. Suppose the CPU is executing a higher burst time process, and in ready queue also there are having a higher burst time processes are there in the ready queue. And if there are 10 processes in the ready queue which having a higher process, and the 11th process is which having a smallest burst time, so what will happen is this lowest burst time process wants to wait till the execution of this highest burst time process. Then after the execution of this lowest burst time process only will get the CPU. After the execution of this lowest burst time process only get the CPU for the lowest burst time. So that is the one of the disadvantages of the FCFS scheduling algorithm, that is the convo effect. If the CPU is currently executing the process that which having a higher burst time at the front end of the ready queue, then the process of the lowest burst time may be get blocked due to the current running of the highest burst time. So and never get the CPU for the execution till the end of the highest burst time processes. So now let's look to the what are the advantages and the disadvantages of the FCFS scheduling algorithms. The advantages includes as the name itself, it is you've been clear that what is the one of the advantages. It is very simple to implement. That is which process is coming first, that process will get the CPU first. So it is very easy to implement and easy to understand. Also, there is no complexity in the FCFS scheduling algorithms. Whereas coming to the disadvantages of the FCFS scheduling algorithm, one of the disadvantages which I already discussed earlier, that is convo effect. Convo effect means if the process which is in the ready queue is already having a process of higher burst time, and the lowest burst time process wants to wait till all the completion of this highest burst time. So the lowest process will not get the CPU for its execution. That is the combo effect. And the another disadvantage is the waiting time of the process with less execution time will be very long. So the lowest burst time process wants to wait for a long period of time in order to get executed, because still the CPU is allocating for a highest burst time process. So it depends upon the which all process coming first, only the execution will be given. And so the average the waiting time is very high, so the average waiting time will be very high. So next one is the throughput. Throughput is not so much efficient, because lots of time wants to wait for a get the CPU. So in order to complete the execution, it gets a long period of time. So the throughput is not very efficient. And in the case of FCFS scheduling, it is a non-preemptive scheduling. So whenever a high priority process came in between, it will not be get executed, because it's a non-priority scheduling algorithm. So now let's discuss this through with an example. So here an example is given of having three processes P1, P2 and P3, and which having the execution time, that means a burst time which is also been given. First the process P1 which having a 24 milliseconds of burst time, P2 having a 3 milliseconds of execution time, and P3 which having a 3 milliseconds of execution time. We want to find out the average turnaround time and average waiting time for this FCFS scheduling algorithm. So now let's check it how we can do that. So in order to do that, first of all we want to draw a Gantt chart for that. Gantt chart which represents the starting time and execution time. That means starting time and the ending time of each process can be represented as a pictorial representation, can be done through a Gantt chart. So now let's check how this table data can be converted into a Gantt chart. So in the question it is already given that these all processes which came at a period of arrival time is 0. That means all these processes came at the arrival time 0, or at same time all these processes were arrived. So now let's check it how we can draw the Gantt chart. So the at arrival time 0, all the processes have arrived. So in the case of FCFS scheduling algorithms, we want to get the processes for execution in the way which came in the order. So since it all came in the particular time interval 0, I have been choosing in this order itself, I have been performing the execution. So P1, after the execution of P1, it will get to P2, and after the execution of P2, it will be turning to P3. So P1 which came at the arrival time 0, and its burst time is 24 milliseconds. So only after execution of 24 milliseconds, it will leave the CPU to the process P2. So P2 which having a unit execution time of 3 milliseconds. So 24 plus 3, 27. So now the execution time is 27, and now the CPU gets free and leave to the process P3. So P3 is also having a 3 milliseconds. So 27 plus 3 which having 30. Now the total execution time is 30 milliseconds. So now let's look how we can do the calculate the turnaround time and the average waiting time. So the turnaround time can be calculated as completion time minus arrival time. So for each process we want to calculate the turnaround time. So process P1 which having we can calculate the turnaround time as, first of all you want the completion time, then want the arrival time. Since we already know all these processes are arrived at time interval 0. So the arrival time for all the processes is 0. So next we want to know the completion time. So after which interval the process P1 has completed. So process P1, by looking the Gantt chart, we can see that the process P1 has completed at 24 milliseconds, and P2 has 27 and P3 has 30. So now we can calculate the turnaround time. So P4, P1, 24 minus 0, it is 24, whereas P2 we know that 27 is its completion time. So 27 minus the arrival time 0, which gives 27. P3 for 30 is the execution time. So 30 minus 0, which gives the 30 milliseconds. So we can, there are 3 processes. So we can calculate the average turnaround, sum of this turnaround by the number of processes, that is number of processes 3. So we can we get that average turnaround time is 24 plus 27 plus 30 by 3, which is equal to 27 milliseconds. Now likewise we can calculate the average waiting time for each processes also. So the average waiting time can be calculated as turnaround time minus the burst time. Burst time means the execution time. So we already now calculated the turnaround time. So the waiting time of the P1, which can be calculated as turnaround time 24 minus the burst time 24, which gives 0 milliseconds, because from the graph, the Gantt chart also you can understand P1 is not waiting it at 0. When it arrived itself, the CPU is allocated to the P1. So but the P2 wants to wait for till 24 milliseconds, then only the CPU is allocated to the P2. Whereas P3 also wants to wait up to 27, then only the CPU is allocated to P3. This can be calculated by our equation that is seen in this table. That is, for P2 the average waiting time is turnaround time minus 27 minus 3, which is equal to 24. Whereas for P3, that is 30 minus 3, which is equal to 27. Likewise, we calculate the average waiting time. That is, average waiting time is equal to sum of the waiting time by number of processes, that is number of processes 3, that is you will be getting as 70 milliseconds. So this is another example. I think from the previous example itself you have been cleared. Now let's have a look on this example too. That is, in this example you can see that in the previous example you see that all the processes which are arrived at the time 0. But in this case, all the processes not arrived at the time interval 0. All the processes are which are arriving at different time intervals. That means P1 is arriving at time 2, P2 is arriving at 0 milliseconds, P3 is arriving at 2 milliseconds, P4 3 milliseconds, and P5 at 4 milliseconds. Now let's look how we can draw the Gantt chart for this. So first of all, check at time interval 0 which process has came. In that manner only we can allocate the CPU. So in process at time interval 0, here P2 has arrived. So we just allocate at time 0, P2 has arrived. P2's execution time is 1. After its execution time 1, it will free up the CPU. Now check at at time interval 1 which all process has came. At time interval there are no process arrived. So at this time the CPU will be at idle condition. So next check the next the arrival time is at 2. At time interval 2, P1 and P3 has arrived. You choose in that order itself. So P1 will be allocated first, then P3 is allocated first. So in the case P1 which having a burst time of 2 milliseconds. So after 2 milli execution of its burst time, it will give the CPU to P3. P3 is having a 3 milliseconds. So after the execution of P3, now the time has arrived at 7. So since 7, all the process has entered into the ready queue. So now pick up on who came first in that order, just pick up and move on to here. So only one process here, that is at time interval P4 has arrived, and time interval 3 P4 has arrived, and time interval 4 P5 has arrived. So it will be in the order itself you choose on to the Gantt chart. So likewise we prepare for a Gantt chart for the FCFS scheduling algorithm. So here as in the previous example, just calculate the turnaround time. Time can be calculated as completion time minus arrival time. Likewise waiting time also can be calculated, and from this we get the calculate the average turnaround time and the average waiting time for the of our process. Since here there are 5 processes, we have been divided it by 5. So by the end of this section, I think you all are familiar with the FCFS scheduling algorithm. In the FCFS scheduling algorithm, which process are requesting the CPU first, that process will be allocated first. And here all we discussed about the disadvantages and the advantages of the FCFS scheduling algorithms. And also we have discussed about 2 problems. How can we perform FCFS scheduling algorithms with an example too. So I think you are familiar with the FCFS scheduling algorithms. Thank you.